Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Chip Edens, and I'm the rector of Christ Church, and welcome to the Faith Forum. And welcome to this year. We're talking about the power of hope. And we know that hope is sort of a very curious thing, and it can be an elusive thing. What exactly is it? How do we find it? What does it feel like to have hope in your life? We know in the Christian story, in the human story, that hope is often something that we only begin to really think about when we need it. In those moments when something happens and we find our souls awakened and searching. And so hope, in a way, begins with prayer. Sometimes our thoughts are prayers, our emotions are prayers, and a prayer can simply be, "Oh God, what's happening?" or "Please help." And hopefully, along the way, in community, in a Christian community like this community, a spiritual home that I have worked with so many of you around, making sure that we have a deep soul, a big heart, and arms that are willing to embrace. We've discovered that hope is a process. It's a journey, finding our way and figuring out what it all means and what we then do with our lives. But with Christ, who finally does in us what we cannot do in ourselves, we're opened up to possibilities. Possibilities driven by empathy, compassion, possibilities that involve courageous steps toward the things that matter most. So there are many ways that I could introduce Kathy Izard today. I could speak of her as an author. I could speak of her as a transformational leader in our community. But what I love about Kathy is that Kathy shows up to the questions of her life. A couple of weeks ago, Jim Hollis said that at the foot of all of our beds every day is fear and lethargy. That when the questions of our lives show up, we can say, well, it's too hard to answer that question. I don't really want to deal with that. It might be disruptive if I explore the questions that are coming up for me. He also says there's lethargy, which is sort of, maybe I'll just put it off. It's too hard to think about that. I'll put it off. I'll stream something. I'll eat something. I'll distract myself. And so it's really a kind of a unique person that shows up to the questions of their life, and not only shows up to the questions, but pulls the threads. And then steps forward in faith and does courageous, bold things. That is Kathy Izard. And she has been an extraordinary example to me, and I think to all of us, about what happens when we have the courage to show up to the questions of our life, and by God's grace allow us to be led into new places and new points of meaning and purpose. Let us pray. The Lord be with you. Gracious God, we give you thanks for Kathy and for the Izard family and for this extraordinary story, a story that's theirs, that's now ours, that she lived and is still living. We thank you for her courage, and we pray that today our own hearts might be opened up to explore the questions of our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, Kathy Izard. Well, Kathy, you have written a must-read book.
Thank you, Chip.
It is just filled with wisdom. And it's called The Last Ordinary Hour, Living Life Now That Nothing Will Ever Be the Same. So I think what might be helpful for us is to talk about life before it changed. And I want to go to that moment when you and Charlie were having turkey sandwiches.
Yeah.
in New England. What was life like before that for you?
Well, first off, I just want to say thanks for a wow introduction that I maybe don't deserve, but thank you for that. And I also just wanted to recognize so many who are coming to this conversation today after some really hard weeks. There's several in our church family this week who've been lost, and people are grieving. And so I know there's a lot of people coming to this conversation that are very tender and through that lens. I also think there's no coincidences in life. So I don't know, maybe it's meant to be that we were scheduled to talk today after a really hard week and month for many people. So I just wanted to say that my hearts are with the Gardner family, the Humphreys family, and all those in this church home who love them and recognize that loss for them. And I guess I would start out by saying our life before those turkey sandwiches in New England. I think Charlie and I were both very type A, control type people, that we just thought, well, we're in charge of our lives. If we make certain decisions, we can control the outcomes, we can predict them. If we take care of our bodies and eat healthily, nothing's gonna happen, and we are in charge, we are in control. And that changed on February 22nd, 2013. We were up visiting our daughter at school, and we had a lunch in a cafe, ordinary turkey sandwiches. We took her back to school, and we were supposed to show up for a play later that night. And we absolutely thought we would see her and go to that play. And instead, we went back to the hotel, and Charlie went to work out in the gym, which he always does religiously. And he came back after 10 minutes saying his arms hurt, and he said he was going to lay down on the bed and take a nap. And so I went over and I looked at him, and his hands were white, which was really, I guess, my first sign of like, I don't know what's wrong with him, but that's not right. Like his hands shouldn't be white. So I tried to wake him up, and he was kind of like a sleepy toddler, trying to make him wake up. We ended up going to an ER, and fast forward the rest of the story, we ended up getting put in an ambulance, being taken to a hospital. I had no idea what was wrong with him, and a nurse finally came in and said, well, your husband has had a heart attack. And I said, what? He had a heart attack? Like, when did that happen? And she says, don't you know? That's why you're here. I said, I have no idea why we're here. Like, I don't know what's wrong with him. And she said, well, we think he's gonna make it. And that was the beginning of this fast forward into a time. He didn't just have a heart attack. We found out he was diagnosed with a rare disease. At the time, only 10 men in the world were diagnosed with that disease. And it became just a whole new life for us with radical uncertainty. The disease has no cure. And so that became our life.
So say something about SCAD, this condition, because I know that there was the definition that you were given, and then you realized after another visit that it was infinitely more complex.
Yes, so the rare disease that Charlie was diagnosed with is called spontaneous coronary artery dissection. And that means that the arteries in the heart can split for no known reason. There was no pressure, there was no resulting event, there was just a weakness in the inner lining of his arteries, and they can dissect. And so he had 2 stents put in that day, and I think we were believing, well, the stents are good, they're gonna hold. Phew, that was scary, but here we go. That was hard. But then we ended up going to Mayo Clinic, because they were doing the only research study in the world at the time. And we found out that it's not just the coronary arteries. It's any artery in your body at any time can split for no known reason. Your carotid, your femoral, your iliac, your entire body is at risk for this. And there's no pill, there's no diet, there's no treatment plan, there's no research. You're just left with that knowledge that it could happen. And don't lift something over 20 pounds that might, cause pressure in your arteries. Probably don't be farther away than a hospital than 1 hour, because you have about 60 minutes once it happens, once your arteries split, to get there. And kind of good luck. So, for 2 type A control freak people who want the plan and the protocol and what do we do and how do we fight this, kind of ironic that that was the disease God gave us, right? Because
Well,
there's
I mean,
no way to do any of
I
that.
mean, I think we need to emphasize that Charlie was the picture of
The-
fitness. Would
the
you say
picture of
something about
health.
just his background?
Yeah, he's a two-time All-American lacrosse player. He has always, really valued his fitness, working out. He lived at the Y. He, does the Stairmaster on high. He pushes himself in the same way he used to as a college athlete. And, the other part of the diagnosis was, all of those sports you love to do, the adrenaline, the push, the things that make you feel alive, the running, the playing tennis, heli skiing. He used to like to get out of helicopters and ski down, ridiculous things. All of those were off limits. So everything that he thought of himself as a person and the way he valued his strength and his physical strength were all, not open to him anymore.
I know it's indescribable to describe what went through your mind, but I'd love for you to maybe speak to that. What went through your mind? What went through Charlie's mind? Maybe the kids. Tell me just about sort of this hitting this wall and then realizing that you actually were going to have to break through the wall again because there was going to be more information
Yeah,
that we'd learn.
I think in the beginning we went into our typical patterns of, well, surely there's an answer. Surely there's a doctor somewhere. Surely there's a program somewhere. I mean, I spent a lot of time on Google trying to find the answers because I was sure that there was an answer there, we just hadn't run across it, or there was something we could do. And then I think that's when you really hit the wall. If any of you have a rare disease or have been in this situation, you go looking for the answers first. And I think once you realize there's no answers, that's a different kind of dark day that there's no plan. And I think I wrote in the book that medical emergencies lead to spiritual emergencies. And that's what it led for me. It's like, well, if I can't control this and there's no answers and there's nothing I can do, like, how do I live in this uncertainty? How do I live in this stress and this tension every day? Barbara Brown Taylor has a great quote from her book, Learning to Walk in the Dark, that deep suffering makes theologians of us all. The questions we ask about God in Sunday school don't compare to the ones we ask in a hospital. And I think that was for us. I started asking the deep, dark questions. Well, what happens if he dies? Like, I'm going to be a widow raising 4 daughters, and what happens if he has another event and then is incapacitated and has a stroke and has a whole different kind of experience? So all of those things led into my spiritual emergency of figuring out not only how to cope with the day-to-day, but all the what-ifs that my brain was running to that might happen, that we might someday be having to deal with.
So in this sort of soul-waking experience, you were taken to a completely sort of new place. How would you sort of describe your faith, your spirituality prior to this event? I mean, you've been active here and other communities. I mean, it wasn't exactly that you were brand new to the faith and spirituality, but how would you describe it prior to the event?
Yeah, I think, I have another book, The 100-Story Home, and I thought that was my faith journey, right? I thought that book was what I wrote about my faith journey, that I'd come to believe in a God who showed up in big miracles, and we could do great things like build housing for people experiencing homelessness. And I thought, I got this faith thing done. I believe in God. This is great. And then I realized you need a different kind of God for this type. When you get one of the 3 Ds in your life, and an unexpected diagnosis, and an untimely death, an unexpected divorce, those things that really, as I write in the book, they shatter you. And you have to come up with a new belief system, a new framework. I think I just believed in the God of miracles and happy places. I wasn't believing in the God that would sit with me in this misery and still be present and still find things holy and sacred, even in the real dark.
Yeah, you were, in the last couple of Sundays, we've been reading the book of Job, hearing about the sort of the Job story of just of loss and just how deeply confounding it was for Job, and yet you were having your own Job-like experience. And I'm struck that one of your first steps on this new spiritual journey that you described was in a labyrinth. So what exactly is a labyrinth?
So a labyrinth, if you've never not walked one, it's not a maze. A maze has no ending. It's kind of you may get a dead end. A labyrinth is very different. You enter and you can't see necessarily where you're going, but there's a center point that you get to, and then a way that brings you out. And I had an experience that became not only kind of a good metaphor for my life, but became the metaphor for this book. And understanding, there's I quote in the book Reverend Lauren Artress, and she is at the Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, and she's done a lot of work around labyrinths. And the idea is that there's a 3-part process when you're working with a labyrinth. When you're faced on this maze, or it's not a maze, the pattern in front of you, and you have to take that first step in. You have to release. She talks about the idea of releasing old ideas, releasing what you might think. You can't see where you're going, but you're going to have to release control as you enter. And as you walk through and you're going through all of the twist and the pattern of the labyrinth, you're trying to reach the center. And in the center, you're meant to receive new information, new wisdom, new things that will help you on whatever it is that you're struggling with. And then as you walk out, which is the same path, again, twisting, the idea of returning. You're returning into your life, having released old ideas, having received new information, and returning to your life kind of with this new wisdom. And so I made that the overarching 4 sections of the book. The first is shattering, that thing that comes that you don't expect. You have to release old ideas. You hopefully receive some new information that's going to help you move forward, and then you return to your life and your situation. And I think the interesting thing about a labyrinth, it kind of makes you realize that you have to let go of life plans and just trust that life path in front of you. You have to trust the labyrinth maker, that they're going to get you to the center, they're going to get you out. And you do this continually. I think, just like I said, I thought I had the spirit thing figured out. I thought I had my spiritual life all set. And you're going to continually need to do this, to release old ideas, to receive new information, to return, as you keep walking through life on a journey that a lot of times you can't see the center, you can't see where you're going, and you're going to have to trust the path in front of you.
Where was this labyrinth? Was it?
Well, I've done several, but the one that I write about on the book is off of Park Road is it Avondale? Mm-hmm. I think Avondale.
How did you discover that?
Well, I'd heard about it, and then actually Kathy Mansfield is a friend of mine, and she had introduced me to labyrinths years ago. We put a labyrinth in at Moore Place. There was one. I'd walked it with people experiencing homelessness. We'd used that for people. I'd never really used it in my life, and I knew it was there, and just one day I was kind of drawn to it, and then, I don't know, I had this experience, and then it became something an idea I really held onto, and then wrapped the framework of this book around.
Well, I wish I had an image of a labyrinth, and there are so many stories about labyrinths, but they emerge out of this concept of pilgrimage, and I want to talk about the pilgrimages. That, generally we're talking about a pilgrimage here, right? But that people would make pilgrimages to Rome, or they'd make and then people would discover that those were arduous journeys, and so many cathedrals put these, like Grace Cathedral would put these labyrinths in the floor of the cathedral so that people could walk them. So how did you prepare to walk into a labyrinth?
That day, I had no idea. I just showed up. I felt drawn to it. I walked it. I was kind of remembering things that Kathy had told me, and that we had been at that labyrinth with 3 guys who were in the Homeless to Homes program, and we'd taken them there that day. And I don't know that I was believing what Kathy was saying about the transformative process. I thought, I don't know if it's going to help these 3 guys. But we actually had a really remarkable experience that day with these 3 gentlemen that were from our Homeless to Homes program. And each one of them had kind of their own experience, and we sat on the edge of the garden afterwards and talked about it. And maybe that was in my head that day as I was passing and feeling really lost and going in to see what would happen that day.
Yeah. I'm struck that as you described, it's so helpful for us to embrace that the spiritual life often either begins anew in a state of disillusionment. And with your entry into Labyrinth, a little bit of skepticism, like, okay, what am I going to do, and what do I do now? And maybe this desire to get it buttoned up like you did before with the God that you thought God was, and now you're on this, okay, who am I, who is God? But then that took you on 2 other spiritual pilgrimages. So talked about the Camino.
I did. I ended up walking the Camino with 14 women friends. Some of us knew each other, some of us did not. And again, I prepared for that like I was going to be running a race. Like I thought, okay, well, this is a lot of miles, and I'm going to need to show up, and I want to prepare for blisters, and I'm going to have the socks and the Band-Aids, and I was prepared for that piece of it. And then we get there, and we realized I really hadn't read my homework. I had no idea what I was showing up for. And
you were going to conquer
I was
Spain.
I was going to conquer Spain, yes.
Yeah.
And ended up getting there and realizing not only were we not doing the full journey, we were only doing 100 miles. And so when you break that in, it wasn't that many miles a day. So here I'd logged miles. I was tracking to make sure that I was walking at least like 10 miles so that I was be ready for this. And we show up, and it really was what we joked that it was our princess pilgrimage, because everything was kind of taken care of for us, and our only job every day was put on our day pack and walk to the next place that we were going to. And I think someone who's I am such a to-do person, and check it off my list and get her done. And my only job was to just put on a backpack and walk and talk and look around. And it became such what I needed at that time in my life, to have there was no doing. My kids joke that I'm a human doing and I'm not a human being. There was just being. There was just the idea of being. And that was such a revelation to me, that I could just, walk and look at the wonder in life and enjoy the women who were with me, and randomly show up in a town and drink a glass of wine and eat manchego cheese. But I think, so the relaxing part was great, but really, the point of that pilgrimage is you're seeing all the holy things along the way, and you're in ancient cathedrals that have been there for years, and that took 300 years to build. I remember standing in this one cathedral that it took 300 years to build, and I thought, who in the modern day world has the fortitude to build something over the course of 300 years? It took us 6 years to build more place, and I thought that was endless, right? And so these guys had 300 years of commitment to this place. So there was a lot of, I gained a knowledge of the sacred and what the thousands of years and people before me had come. And I think the other thing that really struck me from that trip was there was a frieze in one of the cathedrals of St. James, and the pilgrimage is about the way of St. James. And he's with all the disciples, and all the disciples are reading their books, and they're looking down and they're studying the theology. And St. James is in the center, and he has his book, and he's holding it up, and he's pointing to the symbol of the Camino. And it was explained to us that this illustrates that St. James believed that the word and God and spirit and the meaning of life, it's not in books. It's in life, and it's walking. And there's something from the Camino a phrase that I brought back with me is like, caminante, pilgrim, there is no way. You make the way by walking. And that is the lesson of our lives. There's not really one way. We're learning this life, we're living this life as we walk, as we create the path. And we have to let go and trust that the path's going to take us where we're meant to be.
I want to go back to that first day on the Camino, though, where, was it, you were told you're going to walk 3 or 4 miles?
Yeah.
When you had your
there was a lot of us
Garmin
Type A women that were like, okay, well, can we circle back? Can we get our 10 miles? Can we get our steps? What? I don't understand this.
Yeah. So, what do you think that spiritual director was trying to do in you? I mean, you said it was about sort of settling in and settling down. What do you think is what makes it so difficult for us to do that? And at that particular moment, what questions were you holding in your heart?
Well, I think, it's just we go through, especially the first half of our lives, believing we are in control. We're believing that if we set the plan and we do the things, that we are going to control the outcome. And Richard Rohr writes about this, the two halves of spirituality and falling upward. The first half of our lives, we're building the container, and we're, the success, the wealth, all the things that we need. And really, it's the second half of our lives where we realize that was never the point, right? The point is this understanding and being in community with each other and the wonder of the world and all the things that are already here, that really you just need to be and love, and that's life.
So at what point on that pilgrimage do you think you started to open up? To
You know what,
allow it to work itself into you?
Probably wasn't even till day 3, I think. I think I was still waking up hoping to control and do more and exercise, and in some way I realized it's not about blisters, it was about bliss. It was about just enjoying this and being here and not knowing what was going to happen, and popping around and seeing a field of sunflowers and the conversations I was having with the women along the way.
You talked a lot about what you learned, but what do you think you learned about yourself?
Well, I think I exhibited the human doing, and I hopefully came back more of a human being, and tried to live that a little more in my life. I try to do that now, instead of waking up with my to-do list and watching the news and seeing all that happens. I try to wake up to a morning practice of reading and calm and setting the stage for the day that will give me some basis and framework for whatever's going to happen.
Tell us about the pilgrimage to New Mexico. Why, after a pilgrimage to Spain, did you feel led to go on another pilgrimage?
Yeah, so my princess pilgrimage to Santiago, to Spain, was planned in some ways and very sought after. And I was, 3 years later, I was in Santa Fe. I was finished writing parts of this book. I was taking a writing workshop. And I read about a pilgrimage that was very nearby. It was 30 minutes away in Chamayo. And it had this holy healing dirt. And I was reading about this skeptical, kind of like the labyrinth, like, I don't know, holy healing dirt. And part of me was really curious, and part of me thought, I don't think that's real or a thing. And I ended up just, if you read my first book, I talked about trusting the whisper, something that's insistent that won't let you go. This idea of holy dirt would not let me go. I was there for the writing workshop, and some things were happening. And one day I ended up leaving the class and driving to this place, literally with 15 minutes to spare before it closed. I mean, and this is a place where 300,000 pilgrims come a year to find this holy healing dirt. And I show up 15 minutes before they close. I was telling Charlie, like, I'm going to get this holy healing dirt. There's a scene in the book that I talk about it. And he's like, well, do you have a bag? I'm like, a bag? Well, why do we need a bag? And he's like, well, to get your dirt, to bring it home. And I'm thinking, no, I'm sure there's 300,000 people a year. They got this covered. Like, there's a way to get my dirt. But anyway, I showed up at this place. There's no one there. I ended up leaving my bag in the car, and so I'm in this chapel by myself with this, dirt, really not knowing what I'm supposed to do or be, or what is this like. And I just had the most, profound holy moment to realize that, for years, Charlie and I had been hoping that there was a cure for SCAD or a way to escape this. And, recognizing that the prayers for cures and the prayers for healing are completely different. And what we really should have been doing is recognizing all of the miracles in our story and all of the healing that had already happened. So I ended up by that dirt gathering my dirt in a little Dixie cup. I called it my holy cup of Dixie. And and saying the prayers for healing. And you know, SCAD doesn't have a cure. So many diseases don't have a cure. There's terrible cancers that don't have a cure. But we can pray for the healing and the transformation that these things bring into our life that allow us to stop being in control, that allow us to stop being who we were and to start being who we were meant to become. And I think that's what that pilgrimage to Chimayo gave me, was a way to recognize all the miracles in our story and be grateful for those, and stop worrying about what might happen and recognize what is and what has and where we are.
Well, I'm really wanting to explore the pilgrimage piece, because I think, you know, after a diagnosis, after our lives are broken open by whatever it is that breaks our heart, you know, I'm struck that there are a lot of other ways that we could go. You know, we could hold on to the whys, the rage, the anger. We can anesthetize ourselves with, you know, alcohol or more activity. We can carry a cup of bitterness with us, you know, for the rest of our lives. But, you know, in thinking about the labyrinth and thinking about these pilgrimages, I'm struck by this gift that you're giving us here today about the importance of opening ourselves, of saying, I don't have the answers. I'd like to know the answers to all those questions, but I'm going to open myself up, because I think what we know about the spiritual life, whether it's in prayer, pilgrimage, or whatever spiritual pursuit we go down, which is a part of our path of healing, is that we do open ourselves up to allowing God to do in us what we can't do for ourselves. And oftentimes it's, you know, and I love you know, talking about, you know, like, I was going to take a pilgrimage, but it was going to be a controlled pilgrimage.
A controlled pilgrimage.
Yeah, exactly.
But I figured out what was going to happen. Yeah.
And yet you, along the journey, you learned that a whole nother approach, perhaps God's approach, which is to say, okay, Kathy, put it down and dwell with me, and I'm going to show you some things. And what trust it took for you to do that. But yes, the miracles along the way, there were some real miracles that showed up in your life. And I guess I'm struck by this because, you know, you have been, you know, you're the go-to person in Charlotte. You know, if people want to get things done, they call you, right? We got to get Kathy onto this board or in this project. You know, you're the person with the answers. You're the, you know, the superpower. You know, you're kind of the God that you believed in. You know, who comes in and gets things done, and you're trying to model that, and then all of a sudden, you know, the confounding reality. So, what was it like to be in need of help yourself, and to find all of a sudden Jane Harrell comes into your life? Tell us about Dr. Jane.
Yeah,
I don't know if she's here today, but she's always with us.
I know. She sent me a text this morning.
Yeah.
Dr. Jane, I dedicated this book to Dr. Jane because she has been and continues to be a person in my life that helps me believe, not only believe in God, but believe in the angels among us and above us and around us. And I think she was a person in my life that I just loved the way she talked about faith. I mean, she was so certain in her faith, but not in a smug way. It was a faith that filled her up. And it was one of those things that, like, wow, I want what she has. Like, that looks very solid and comforting. Yeah. And I think she also can talk about God in a way that feels relatable. And so when she became Charlie's doctor, and she has literally saved his life time and time again, she was also the person who could ask spiritual questions of Charlie without him saying, ugh, like Jane's talking about God and Jesus again. You know, I mean, he could hear her. You know, there's certain people that can talk about religion and you can't hear what they're saying because they're either so certain or so one-sided. but when she talks, you can listen. And she could say things to Charlie like, you know, you should be dead 3 times over. You better figure out why God still wants you here. And he would come home thinking about that, like, wow, you know what Jane said to me today? You know,
Literally truth to power,
and
right
yeah,
there.
truth to power. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a true story. He should be dead 3 times. There's 3 instances in the book where, yeah. So, yeah, she was that person in our life who was inching us toward the inevitable. I mean, if you are going to withstand, you know, this shattering in your life, you're going to have to build a framework of faith, you know, at some point. I think maybe you can keep going down, drinking more wine or exercising more or eating more chocolate or whatever. And I tried all those things and none of them worked. So I finally had to build a framework of faith. But she was that person for me, and I think for Charlie as well, and for our whole family, that, you know, she would send me, you know, Bible quotes, not the words, just like, you know, John, whatever. And I'd be going, oh my gosh, like she knows I have to go to Bible Gateway to look this up because I don't know what she's talking about. But then I would go and look and see, and it's like, oh, you know, she's got this faith framework. And so you know, we're each building our faith our own way. But I do think Jane Harrell has been such an amazing miracle in our life for who she is and how she shows up in faith
And what she's endured.
What she has endured, and also being a miraculous doctor. She's an incredible doctor.
Yeah. There was somebody else, too, as you were trying to sort of process everything that was happening.
Yeah.
And that was Lisa.
Lisa Saunders. Yeah. So there was the 3rd time Charlie died, and really died, he actually did. He flatlined. They called a code blue in the hospital. They sent the priest to be with me, and I thought my husband was dead. And so I'm sitting with that priest, and I am railing on him. I was so angry with God, and I thought, wow, really? We've been so careful, and we've done all these things, and we've believed, and really this is, you know, we've stayed within an hour in the hospital, and Charlie's going to die in a hospital in this random freak event that makes no sense and is so rare. It never happens to anyone, but it happened to him. So I was just going on and on to this priest, and poor guy, he had no idea who I was or what I was talking about. He was just sitting with me in my anger and my despair, and they came back to say that they'd revived Charlie, and I ended up leaving that poor guy. I need to find him and write him a letter. I don't know who he is, but anyway, I ended up leaving him and going, but that was with me. And so when we came back to Charlotte, that happened while we were in Minnesota. And by the time we were air ambulanced back and trying to bring Charlie back from this open heart procedure he'd endured, I ended up coming to see Lisa. And I just, you know, was puddled in her office saying, Lisa, you know, all of these things keep happening to Charlie. These 1 in a million never happens to anyone, disease that nobody gets, you know, all of these things. I don't get it. I feel cursed. I feel like we are just cursed at this point. And Lisa just looked at me. I swear I didn't think there was anything that she could say that would make me feel better or change my mind. And she looked at me and said, Kathy, when I listen to your story, I just feel like you're under a canopy of blessings and grace. And that just really flipped something for me that day. To look at it and go, oh yeah, like that day after the turkey sandwich, that ambulance driver got us to the hospital in time. There was a doctor, the place was closed for the day. There was a doctor who saved Charlie's life that day. There was Jane Harrell in our life who's just been amazing. You know, even when Charlie flatlined in Code Blue, they brought him back. I mean, there's a song I listen to now when I'm walking called Million Little Miracles. I can't even count them anymore. You know, miracle of miracles, so many I can't even count them anymore. And Lisa has helped me see our story that way. The last 8 years have not been about curse. They've been about living and survival. And aren't we lucky, you know?
Yeah. She always finds the right words.
I know, she was great.
She does. You know, you and I both know, particularly in light of this week, but in all the people that have endured great suffering who did not have the outcomes that you and Charlie have had. We know these people well that we love and adore. And yet, part of the journey is to continue to say, how is God showing up? And how can I find those blessings? How can this experience, whatever the experience is, how can it not just diminish me, but enlarge my life in some way? And I think for everybody, that's a different program, a different journey. And yet, if we, to honor the human experience, we have to acknowledge what's happened, and at the same time, ask God to take us down our own spiritual journeys, to show us the graces that are among us. And I'm just struck by that, Kathy. Would you describe this book cover and this gold around it? What is this book cover meant to represent? Because I think it really goes to how we find God amidst the pieces, and how God helps reshape and rebuild our lives.
Yeah, so the book cover refers to two things. One thing you'll see here, this is the symbol of the Camino. So we've talked about, the pilgrimage, but if you've ever walked the Camino, that's the symbol that you follow the entire way. There's just signs everywhere you go, and it's that shell. And then the other are these gold lines, and they refer to a Japanese practice called kintsugi, and it's a 400-year-old practice that's done when pottery is shattered. This process is taking a gold epoxy and putting the pieces back together. And in Japan, they believe that this piece that's restored, that has all the cracks in it, is more beautiful and, more special than when it was whole in the first way. And so to me, it's the same idea with us, right? There is something that's going to shatter each one of us. Like, none of us is going to get out of this life without losing someone we love or having hard circumstances. Some people have multiple things. So when we are shattered, not if, when that time comes, what if we believed that there is a process of a way of finding the golden epoxy in our lives to put ourselves back together, and that believe once we do that we're beautiful and stronger than we were before. And I think that's what this cover means to me. That's what the process has been to me. I mean, I am not grateful Charlie has this rare disease. I would never be grateful that somebody has cancer or the suffering that comes with it. But I am grateful for the transformation that's happened in our lives as a result, because I think both Charlie and I live so much more intentionally now. We had to make choices that for him even included retiring way earlier than he ever would have thought of, that have allowed us to show up and do much different things that we were. And for that, I am really grateful.
Mm-hmm. Say more about that, about these sort of holy shifts that have happened in your life. You don't have to do the before and the after, but say more about what matters now. I mean, in the book, you quote, I don't know if this is your quote or someone else's quote, your italics or someone else's, but you talk about filling your life with beauty and love and friendship.
Yeah, that one's mine.
That was yours. Good. I love that.
But I don't know if we can find that quickly. But after living in constant fear of death every minute for years, this is what I can tell you about striving to be alive. Fill your minutes with the music of life. Fill your hours with pursuits that will matter. Fill your days with loving others. Fill your soul with all that is holy along the way. And I think that is what I try to do now. I try to live so much more intentionally. I mean, yes, we've been worried for 8 years about Charlie, but the fact is I could go out on Providence Road and get hit by a bus too, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, none of us know. It is, death is certain, life is the question, right? We are, none of us is getting out of here alive. Like, we are all going to.
Can I just pause you there for a minute? Yeah. Did you all hear that? Did you hear what she just said? Say it again.
I don't know, sometimes I don't know what I say. Life is certain, like death is certain, life is the open-ended question, yeah.
Aren't you so glad you were here today for that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So I guess that's what I'm trying to do. I think that's what Charlie's trying to do, is just appreciate every day. Like, wake up to the wonder. Show up. What am I going to do today? Even if it's just, spending time with people you love, that is something. We are here. This is an exquisite privilege to be alive. And so let's not waste it worrying about fear and what might happen. Let's show up now, and tell the people in your life that you love them. Spend time with your family. All that is what matters. So.
well, it's amazing to think that the journey continues, that you're living that journey now. And one of the things that I guess our culture teaches us is that we all have these kind of unlived lives. And the question is, who's going to determine what that life is? And we both know in this culture that we live in that it's so easy to conform, right? Mm-hmm. That conformity is the siren to sort of shrink wrap our lives down. If life is the question, to shrink it down in such a way that we're about doing what we think we should be doing. And yet there's nothing like this to sort of jar you to really ask the question, what matters most and how am I going to live it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do you hope for when you think about, we're talking about hope today, and we've talked about the process of hope, which amazing, to take this, to live the questions, to take the spiritual life, the process by which, and then the graces that sort of come away. Mm-hmm. But what would you hope for us, and what would you encourage us to sort of think about as we're showing up to the questions of our life, trying to live those questions? What would you say to us?
I guess the whole point of the book, Charlie kind of says it's a bait and switch, that I was just writing for myself to process myself, and then one day I was like, I think I'm actually going to publish that book. And he's such a private person that he struggled with that. But I think the reason I was willing to put ourselves and so much of our private life out there, which is not innate to us, is that I hope it doesn't take a heart attack or a rare disease to wake you up to your life, right? I mean, I think, wow, we got a really hard, jarring, hit on the head many times over. And lots of people in this room have had that as well, but some haven't. Some are just being softly, tussled out of whatever their comfortable life is and asked to look at questions and look at life. So I'm hoping that through our story, it gets people to ask those questions with maybe less suffering involved. So.
Well, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story, and most especially for living the courageous life that you're living.
Thank you.
And I think what we all need, as we pursue hope, is courage. And this is profoundly encouraging, I think, for all of us. And I just want to say thank you so very much for being here today. And I want to pray.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
So I brought this. This is something that I read to myself a lot. It's it's a morning offering. It's by John O'Donohue, and it gives me a lot of comfort. So I brought it today. May my mind come alive today to the invisible geography that invites me to new frontiers, to break the dead shells of yesterday, to risk being disturbed and changed. May I have the courage today to live the life that I would love, to postpone my dream no longer, but to do at last what I came here for, and waste my heart on fear no more.
Amen.
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 Amen.